Aviation fans, welcome back to another episode of Imperial Diecast. Today, I'll review this 1/500 scale Airbus A300-B4 by Herpa. Now, I got this plane on eBay without box and in a damaged state for €8. Damaged in that it was missing one of the two main landing gears, and thus couldn't stay upright and had a tilt. So I did a DIY repair by cutting a piece of cardboard and gluing it where the wheels are supposed to be, and painted two wheels on either side of it using a black marker, as you will see in a couple of minutes, and it stands properly now. What is nice though is that the rest of its landing gear is the new generation scale-accurate gear, which, as a model plane collector, is something I am slowly moving over to, so you'll begin to see more and more higher quality models on this channel compared to the OG Herpas I used to review until recently. So, this right here is an Airbus A300 in the livery of Eastern Airlines, a carrier that was operating out of Miami, Florida until 1991. And this Eastern A300 is quite an important model in commercial aviation history because it was the first Airbus to enter the US market. You see, by the mid-1970s, despite having invented something really unique, namely a widebody twinjet back in the early 70s, where Boeing would need 10 more years to come up with a widebody twinjet competitor in the form of the 767-200, which also ended up being smaller and shorter, Airbus had still been struggling financially due to having to cover the huge R&D cost of the A300 program. But 6 years later, they still hadn't been able to break into the US market, given that companies like Boeing and McDonnell Douglas held such a monopoly there. But Eastern Airlines, which had been in financial trouble themselves since the 1960s, was looking for a plane to replace their aging 727 fleet. And Airbus agreed to sell them the 250-seater A300 for the price of a hypothetical 170-seater Eastern Airlines had been looking for, and thereby helped Eastern Airlines during a time of financial difficulty, and Eastern, led by the former astronaut Frank Bormann, brought the A300 into the US market as operations began in 1977 and became a success. So, this is, after the DC-8, the second plane that I'm reviewing in the Eastern Airlines hockey stick livery that lasted from 1965 to 1971, after which they started replacing more and more of the white fuselage with bare metal. 1971 onward, the underbelly and rudder, and 1977 onward, the entire fuselage. But they couldn't do that on the A300s due to the different skin, which they acquired 1977 onward, so they kept them in the old white livery, and started painting them in gray instead of white 1984 onward, as you can see in this picture. But they had already started painting the underbelly and rudder in gray a few years earlier, as you can see here. So my assumption is this model by Herpa is supposed to represent Eastern's A300s as they appeared from 1977 to 1980-ish. The plane itself is the B4 variant, which came out in 1975. 4 years after the launch of the original A300 back in 1971. The problem with the A300-B4 was that despite being an improvement over the B2, it still had a range of only 5,300 kilometers or 3,300 miles, which was fine for domestic US flights or continental European flights, but not enough for crossing the Atlantic like Paris to Boston. I mean, I suppose you could attempt Dublin to Halifax, but back in the day, it was also forbidden for twinjets to be further away than a certain amount of time from the nearest airport for an emergency descent and landing, a set of rules called ETOPS. And ETOPS was crucial in keeping trijets like the L-1011 and DC-10 in the market, despite consuming 30% more fuel than the A300, because not only did they have a longer range, but were also allowed to fly over oceans compared to the Airbus. Eventually, though, aviation authorities realized the redundancy provided by a third engine wasn't absolutely necessary, and twinjets were fine for crossing the Atlantic. And that's when Airbus shortened the fuselage to extend the range of the A300 and called the new variant the A310, which then played a role in pushing the trijets out of the markets because, as mentioned before, they consumed 30% more fuel than the A300 and probably even more than the A310. We'll start our review at the port side of the aircraft at the L1 door, and you can see that it has a porthole, and next to it there's a small script saying A300, I believe, with the Airbus logo to its left. And underneath the cockpit windows, we also have a little number. Then, of course, we have the L2 door, the Eastern titles, along with the American flag, the window line, which is in a different shade of blue than the line underneath it. Then we have the emergency exit located behind the wings, the registration saying November 223 Echo Alpha, and the L4 door, along with the curve of this hockey stick livery to the vertical stabilizer, which also has a silver leading edge, just like the horizontal stabilizers. And if we take a look at those, you can see that they also have the elevators hinted at. And now if we take a look at the wings of the plane, the flight surfaces of the A300 are kept in a different shade than the fuselage, which is in white, while the wings and the horizontal stabilizers are in gray. But the slats do have a silver leading edge, and at the trailing edge you can see that we've got the trailing edge fairings and the slats, air brakes, ailerons, and so on, which are all nicely visible. When Frank Bormann leased the A300s, he was accused of being unpatriotic, but he pointed out that the A300's engines were General Electric CF6s, and thus very much American. I think they were the only part of the A300 that was exposed metal, and Herpa has done a good job with the fan blade detailing. And at the front of the plane, we have a black radome, which is a bit hard to see due to the dark blue cheat line surrounding it. There's also some black anti-glare paint underneath the cockpit windows, which also have silver window frames. I just wish that the nose gear doors had the last two letters of the registration on them. The engines may be a tad too big on this model, though. Kinda look like GE90s. And here's a look at the other side of the 1/500 scale Airbus A300 by Herpa, and you can see that these new generation models have the cargo doors at the front, at the back, and then there's a smaller service door or something here. And now let me show you what I did here. So you can see that this is the landing gear that was broken, and it has just been fixed by me with a little bit of cardboard. I think you can see it a little bit better now. It's just a rectangular piece of cardboard with like two black circles painted on it to simulate the wheels as they look on the other side. And from a distance you can't really tell. So yeah, that's how I managed to get it to sit, and I think it looks good. As for the APU, we don't really have much detail here. If I can get this to focus, there. So considering this is just a 1/500 scale model, but you can add some paint here in silver yourself if you wish to. And now let's take a look at the bottom of the plane. And you can see that we have these distinct, well, I'm not sure what these are. I think these are air ducts for the ram air fans above the Herpa logo. Then, of course, we have this outline for the landing gear doors, the main landing gear doors, that is. Again, here's a closer look at my painting compared to the real thing. And aside from this little seam here in the middle, which a lot of airplanes have, it looks great.
Also, here at the back of the A300, we have the tail strike protection system hinted at.
So yeah. Now for comparison, I have here a later variant, the A300-600. You can tell the difference in that the -600 has wingtip fences. Also, notice the difference between the OG and the new generation landing gear. And another barely noticeable difference between the two is that the -600's fuselage is supposed to be about 50 centimeters or 1.5 feet longer in real life. Again, you can tell how much more massive the new generation CF6s are compared to the old. I think somewhere in the middle would have been the ideal size. But yeah, otherwise pretty similar planes. So I hope you guys liked my review of Herpa's 1/500 scale Eastern Airlines Airbus A300-B4. I have other plane reviews on my channel you might want to check out. And take care, have a wonderful day. This is Imperial Diecast, signing out.